quiser.
Welcome to the first webinar Portuguese Culture promoted by FEUP Intercultural Contact Points. International Mother Language Day was celebrated yesterday and aims to promote, preserve and protect all language spoken by people around the world. To celebrate this day, we invited Professor Maria Clara Barros from the Faculty of Arts and Humanities of University of Porto, who will speak about the history of the Portuguese language and give some practical examples which intended to provide you with the first contact with the Portuguese language. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. So, shall I start?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll share my thing. It's all right? Can you see it?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll talk about the evolution of the Portuguese language, and then I'll do a sort of workshop with the Portuguese idiosyncrasies, special features. The objective, oh, sorry. Can't see it. The objective of this seminar is to analyze some of the specific characteristics of the Portuguese language and of its evolution from the period of its formation in the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula to the period of the constitution of the modern Portuguese norms. In addition, in the workshop part, some aspects of the specific characteristics of the language will be discussed. So, first part. At the beginning, in about the 8th century, Portuguese was spoken in a very small area and had only a few 100,000 speakers. It is a Romance language, and its origin can be traced back to Latin. The region where the Portuguese language originated is a very small part of northwest of the Iberian Peninsula, in an area between the Gulf of Biscay to the north and the Douro River to the south. This area corresponds to an ancient Roman province of Galicia Magna, as you can see on this map here. So that's the region where the language started. This Romance language already presented different specific characteristics from the 9th or 10th century onwards. In fact, the northwestern part of the peninsula had from an early time some highly idiosyncratic features. Almost the whole of the peninsula had been occupied by Germanic tribes, but the northwest had mainly Swabian tribes, in opposition to the other regions dominated by the Visigoths. You can see it here. So this part was the part of Swabian, and all the rest of the Iberian was the Visigoths. So at this early stage, the center of political, religious, and cultural activity was localized in the Minho region, between the river Minho and the river Douro. Urban areas included Braga, with an archbishop, Guimarães, and a little later, Oporto. From the 8th or 9th century and during the following 300 years until the 13th century, all the Romance language of the peninsula, such as Portuguese, Leonese, Spanish, and Catalan, developed simultaneously, each with their own particular characteristics. All of them have their origin in the north, which at the time had already been free from Arab domination. We can see here around the year 990 or something. You can see the Portuguese in green, then Leonese, then Spanish is the red color, and Catalan yellow. So, like other Romance languages of the Iberian Peninsula, Portuguese expanded towards the south, accompanying the military and political movement of the Christian Reconquest, the Reconquista. This movement carried on in a southerly direction during the course of the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries. This movement of Reconquista took place very slowly. This was not only a military movement, but also an occupation of the territory. And there were advances, but also big failures and setbacks. For example, it took 4 attempts to reconquer Coimbra. The region between the Douro River and the Mondego, between the cities of Porto and Coimbra, with a distance of about 100 kilometers, and which can now be covered in less than an hour on the motorway, took more than a century to occupy successfully. Later, the advance towards the Tejo River was also slow, and the conquest of Lisbon in 1147 was very difficult. There you can see around 1300, between 1200, 1300. You can see again the 4 languages. Naturally, Spanish is becoming hegemonic, is becoming the big language of the Iberian Peninsula. Portuguese keeps its space in the western part. The reconquista of the region south of Tejo was faster, achieved by 1300. This is explained by the configuration of the land, which is flatter, and the kingdom's greater military power. Thus, there were no rifts in occupation and settlement, and there are hardly any linguistic borders to be seen in this region. The territorial completion of Portugal took place in the middle of the 13th century, and the expansion of the language was also completed by this time. With its expansion in Europe complete, borders were established as was the area of modern European Portuguese. The territorial limits of European Portugal in 1300 are roughly those of today. You can see this is about 1300. And you can see again Spanish taking over all the peninsula. Still a bit of Arab domination in the Caliphate of Granada. Now, there is an evolution of the Portuguese language from the period of its formation until the constitution of the standard of modern Portuguese. At the beginning of the nation, the capital was in the north, Guimarães, a little later in the center, in Coimbra, and later still in the south, in Lisbon or even Évora. Since the end of the 13th century, Lisbon has been the capital and the center of national political life. It is the region that concentrates power, and now it's the region of the norm. Like Spanish, Portuguese was a northern language of the peninsula, but unlike Spanish, modern Portuguese had its standard in the central southern region where Coimbra and Lisbon are located. This has caused significant differences between Portuguese and Spanish. For instance, Spanish does not differentiate between b and v. Spanish has a more palatal s. Spanish conserves the affricated ch. Spanish evolves diphthongs, o and a, and in Spanish there are new diphthongs, like ye, we. You say pie, foot, nuevo, siete, puerta. In Portuguese, e and o are kept, pé, novo, set, porta. European Portuguese is not a highly dialectic language. Indeed, quite the opposite of the linguistic situation of French or German, there are almost no problems of mutual understanding between the different dialects in Portugal. Therefore, in the case of Portuguese, the dialects of the north and the south are quite similar. The early geographical and political unity of Portugal certainly helped this degree of resemblance and the absence of deep differences. The extension of Portuguese begins again with the discoveries. First, in the 15th century, with the Atlantic islands, Madeira and Azores, and later in the 16th century, the expansion of the language continued to regions outside Europe. Portuguese was transported overseas and spread over vast territories. This modern expansion of Portuguese led to the establishment and evolution of the Portuguese language in Brazil, where a different standard of the language developed, and in Africa. The Portuguese settlers born in Brazil spoke European Portuguese, but with a few specific characteristics that became more pronounced over time. In the 18th century, we have the first information on specific traits which were characteristic of Brazilian Portuguese, particularly particularly the open tone of unstressed vowels. The Brazilian population of Indian and African origin or mixed race learned Portuguese, which also accentuated some evolutions due to Indian and African languages. There is a certain geographic diversity in Brazilian Portuguese. The standard norm is spoken in southeastern region, in the federal states of Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. Although Brazil is a huge country, a real degree of linguistic unity can still be observed. I'll have a word about the expansion of the language in Africa. Portuguese is spoken and written by part of the population in the new African states where Portuguese has the status of an official language. It is the language of administration, education, the press, and relations with the outside world. Portuguese coexists with local, regional, and national languages and serves as an instrument of communication. Africa seems to represent a future area of expansion of the Portuguese language. Portuguese is also used in everyday life in African countries, and the number of speakers learning it as their native language has increased significantly. And for the younger generations, especially those in cities, Portuguese is the native mother tongue. In general, the number of people who speak Portuguese in Africa is increasing exponentially. Different African standards for this language are already developing. So I say, if we say that Portuguese has many more native speakers than Slovenian or Hungarian, we will not be surprised. However, if we say that Portuguese has many more native speakers than German or French, this will very likely be met with some disbelief. Yet, with some 265 million native speakers, Portuguese is one of the most widely spoken mother tongues in the world and is potentially a global language. It oscillates between the 5th and the 7th position within the framework of the most spoken languages in the world. Portuguese is the national language of Portugal and Brazil. In Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, and São Tomé and Príncipe, it has the status of official language being used in politics, administration, education, and media. It is also recognized as a national language in Timor and Macau. It is thus a pluricentrical language, which, as you can see in this map here. So it's a little bit all over the world. Now, the Portuguese idiosyncrasies. I haven't got much time left, but I would like to, I will attempt to look at a few of the language's idiosyncrasies. Portuguese is, from a phonetic point of view, a language characterized by the frequent presence of nasal vowels and diphthongs, which make it sometimes more difficult for foreigners. Frequent palatals in all positions of the words, like sh, sh, y, ñ, and a large number of oral diphthongs. I'll have a look at those phonetic characteristics. So frequent palatal sounds like sh, j in all positions of words. For instance, the pronunciation of s and z at the end of words or at the end of a syllable. And the pronunciation is either sh, I'm going to pronounce the s's, like in casca, pasta, atrás, faz. Or j, mesmo, desde, atrás de. So you write an S or a Z, but you read sh or j. You read it palatal. Also, the pronunciation of unstressed vowels. The pronunciation of E is a silent E and O is U. It is as if we drop vowels. At the end of the word, for instance, you'll say pas. There's no vowel. And if it's an O, you'll say carro with an U. In the non-stressed position, E is mute and O is U, like in some words like pegar, pegar, chegar. There's no vowel, meter. With the O, the pronunciation will be U, like in comer, morar, poder, or começar, which will be pronounced começar. Different hasn't got any airs. It's actually pronounced different. Now, the oral diphthongs, we've got 11 diphthongs, like E in papéis, E in leite, ai, mais, oi, dói, oi, foi, ui, cuidar, eu, rio, eu, teu, meu, el, céu, ao, mau, ou, estou, sou. Nasal diphthongs, which is a rare feature. There aren't many languages with nasal diphthongs, but in Portuguese we've got 5, like ein, mein, pães, ao, sorry, like in mão or pão, em vem, tem, põe, like in põe, and uim, muito. Nasal vowels. Actually, we've got the 5 vowels nasal. In, an, like in cinto, cento, cento, sonso, assunto. So there's a good field of learning the nasals. And 2 phenomena distance Portuguese from closely related language, like Spanish, for instance. The loss, the drop of L. Spanish will keep the L, solo, alone, and malo, bad. Portuguese, só, mal. And N, Spanish, mano, hand, buena, good. Portuguese, mão, boa. There's symmetry between não, no, and sim, yes. In Portuguese, we don't use the word sim, yes, very much, but we do use the word não, no. Instead of yes, we answer affirmatively by repeating the verbal form as a sort of an echo. I'll show some examples. Got this sentence. Did he leave the faculty building? Which is, ele saiu da faculdade? The answer will be saiu. Only. There's no yes, no sim. It's only the echo of the question. And of course, the negative answer employs não. Não saiu. No, he didn't leave. The second sentence, did she go to the bar? Ela foi ao bar? The answer will be either foi, only, foi, meaning yes, she went, or the negative, não foi. No, she didn't go. Another question, is the professor here? O professor está? The answer will be está, only. No yes, no nothing. Está, the echo of the question. And the negative, não está. The last one, are you going to the seminar? Vais ao seminário? And the answer will be vou. Or the negative, não vou. So this is an idiosyncrasy, a language without yes, without sim. I decided to use this quotation from some English that were learning Portuguese. And they said 2 main obstacles for the beginning in learning Portuguese are the complex grammar, especially with regard to verbs, and the old-fashioned, almost oriental form of treatment. The first thing you want to do with a language is to talk to people. But in Portugal, a person is subject to being questioned in 4 or even 5 different ways, and each of these modes is associated with a different degree of intimacy or respect, each firmly fixing the type of relationship between the person being questioned and the person who addresses you. This is actually true, as I can show you. There is a complex verbal system with many inflection forms, some of which are only to be found in Portuguese. For example, the inflective infinitive or the future subjunctive. And some other forms still have great vitality in Portuguese. E.g., we have many subjunctive forms. And actually, they are used. They are used. You cannot ask a question or give an order without using them. Another aspect, the sentence can have a null subject. And it happens a lot. The sentence, she wrote the paper, is actually in Portuguese, escreveu o artigo. And the sh is not there. We had lunch at the bar. In Portuguese, almoçamos no bar. And there's no we. It rained a lot. Choveu muito. There's no it. We went to the office. Fomos ao gabinete. There's no we. What else? The forms of address that the English found so oriental. In informal speech, with friends and family, we use the familiar form tu. For instance, do you know? The question, tu sabes? Or the question, are you coming? Tu vens? But in more formal situations, with people we don't know well, we avoid saying você, which is you, and instead we use the person's name or their profession and the verb in the third person. We'll see some examples. For instance, if you have the question, do you know Mr. Martins? It will be, o Sr. Martins sabe? If you ask, are you coming, Mrs. Teresa? It will be, a Dona Teresa vem? Sometimes we use profession names. For instance, do you know Professor Isabel? Or the other way around. Professor Isabel, do you know? It will be, a Professor Isabel sabe? Or if the question is, are you coming to work, Mr. Lopes? We know that Mr. Lopes is an engineer. The question will be, o senhor engenheiro vem trabalhar? The question, are you coming, when speaking to an architect? O senhor arquiteto vem? Or the question, do you like it, when speaking to doctors, lawyers, economists? O senhor doutor gosta? Or a senhora doutora gosta? So an all different way of addressing people. And muito obrigada pela atenção. So thank you very much. And boa tarde, which is good afternoon, and is used after lunchtime and before it goes dark. In the morning, you'll say bom dia. But I guarantee you, if you say bom dia at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, someone will say boa tarde, because you cannot say bom dia after lunchtime. After dark, after it goes dark, you'll say boa noite. So now it will be the appropriate form, boa tarde, and thank you very much again.
Okay, Professor Clara Barros, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. It was a very interesting intervention. So now, for the second session, we have the pleasure to have with us Paula Almeida Mendes, which is a PhD and integrated researcher, also from FLUP, that will deliver us a lecture about Portuguese culture and some precious tips about our traditions, and so you can know us a little better. Thank you, Professor.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon to everyone. I will share my presentation with you. You can see that? It's okay? I will start by focusing on some aspects related to the geography in Portugal, and then I will make a brief presentation highlighting some aspects related to the history of Portugal, some of the greatest names of the Portuguese literature, and then I will talk a little bit about traditions and the customs of the Portuguese people. Now, we will start by looking at some aspects related to the geography of Portugal. Mainland Portugal is located on the Iberian Peninsula, which is placed in the southwestern Europe and is separated from Africa by the Strait of Gibraltar. The continental territory of Portugal, as you can see, the shape similar to a rectangle. To the north and east, Portugal borders on Spain. The border separating mainland Portugal with Spain is demarcated by rivers and deep valleys, a natural border, and landmarks the conventional border. The autonomous regions of the Azores and Madeira are also part of Portugal. The Azores Islands are an archipelago located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in the west of Portugal. São Miguel is the largest island and Corvo is the smallest island. The archipelago of Madeira is also located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, southwest of mainland Portugal. The capital is the city of Funchal. With regard to relief, the Portuguese territory does not all have the same natural characteristics. In this way, we find different forms of relief, such as the plateau in Trás-os-Montes, the mountains like Serra da Estrela, the plain in Alentejo, the sandy beach in the north of Portugal, and the rocky beach in the Algarve. Although rugged with considerable unevenness in the north of the Tagus River, the Portuguese territory does not reach high mountains. Its highest point is found in Serra da Estrela. The north is mountainous and has numerous valleys. Both the relief of the island of Madeira and the archipelago of the Azores is very mountainous and of volcanic origin. The islands generally have high coasts and are difficult to access. It is on one of these highlands, the island of Pico in the Azores, that Portugal's highest mountain is found. This one. Now I will speak a little bit about some aspects on the history of Portugal. The first people settling in the Iberian Peninsula are lost in time. The climatic transformation that took place in most of Europe and Asia completely changed the landscape. When the temperature increased, the ices began to melt, which gave rise to rivers and lakes. Different species of animals and plants appear, and man was then able to leave the caves and improve his way of life. Around the 10th century BC, the people who inhabited the Iberian Peninsula lived on grazing and rudimentary agriculture, which allowed them to permanently stay in the same places. It was around this time that the Iberians emerged, men who were dark and of medium height. These people who reached the Iberian Peninsula, possibly through North Africa, settled in the south and east on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Around the 6th century BC, the Celts arrive, coming from the center of Europe. They will occupy the zone to the northwest of the peninsula. Over time, the Celts and Iberians ended up mixing in some areas. They lived grouping tribes that often went to war, and for that very reason, they looked for the top of the mountains or highlands to build their homes there. One of these tribes was that of the Lusitanians, who inhabited the region between the Tagus River, known by the name of Lusitania. We see here a Celtic gold torque found in Portugal. And here some statues about Kalike warriors. That we can see these statues in the Museum of Archaeology in Lisbon. Phoenicians, Greeks, and Carthaginians were peoples that, between the 10th and 3rd century BC, arrived in the peninsula for commercial purposes. The Romans invaded the peninsula in the 3rd century BC and remained there for more than 6 centuries. With the conquest of the peninsula, the Romans came to dominate the entire Mediterranean Sea. They were responsible for introducing innumerable changes in the customs and ways of life of the populations, what we call Romanization. We see the Roman ruins in Conímbriga, in the center of Portugal, and here a Roman bridge in Chaves. Around the 5th century, the barbarians invade the Iberian Peninsula. The Visigoths beat the Suevi and imposed their rule all over the entire peninsula. In the 18th century, the Iberian Peninsula is once again invaded by another people, the Moors. These people sought to expand their religion and occupy the fertile lands of the peninsula. However, they are unable to fully dominate the peninsula as Asturias, in the north, remains in the hands of the Christians. The permanence of the Arabs or Moors in the Iberian Peninsula greatly influenced the peninsular culture. Christians will try to recover the land occupied by the Moors and begin a process known as the Christian Reconquest, a Reconquista Cristã. The Christian Reconquest was long and difficult. As the area belonging to the Christians widened, several kingdoms were formed: León, Castile, Navarra, Aragon. Within their kingdoms, Christian kings sometimes formed counties, thus seeking to reward rendered services and defend areas already conquered. One of these counties was the Condado Portucalense, Portucalense County, if we can translate. That will be the origin of the formation of the Kingdom of Portugal. In 1096, the King of León was Afonso VI, who, wanting to reward the French Count Henry of Bourgogne for his help in the fight against the Moors, marries him with his daughter, Dona Teresa, and donates the Condado Portucalense to him. They will be the parents of Dom Afonso Henriques, who will be the first king of Portugal. The castle of Guimarães was the first place where Afonso Henriques established his court after 1128, which, according to tradition, transformed Guimarães, in the north of Portugal, into the first capital of the future Kingdom of Portugal. For all these reasons, Guimarães is usually considered the cradle of Portuguese nationality. The Condado Portucalense, the Portucalense County, managed to be independent of the Kingdom of León in 1143 through the Treaty of Zamora. The King Afonso VII of León recognized his cousin Afonso Henriques as king of the new Kingdom of Portugal. To increase and consolidate the territory, Afonso Henriques and his successors continued the fight against the Moors. This conquest of the territory will extend to the south and will last more than a century between the reigns of Afonso Henriques and Afonso III. The 15th century will see a profound change in the Portuguese historical context. In fact, in order to try to solve the kingdom's economic and social problems, the Portuguese conquered the city of Ceuta in North Africa in 1415. Ceuta was of interest to the Portuguese because it was rich in cereals and it was located at a strategic point. The Portuguese expansion will lead the Portuguese to make conquests in North Africa and discoveries by sea in the Atlantic and West African coast, later extending to India and Brazil. Navigation in unknown seas brought about new boats, caravels, and other ships, new orientation processes, like astronomical navigation and more accurate maps. Vasco da Gama's discovery of the sea route to India in 1498 will allow the Portuguese to make the Cabo route the main commercial road of the time. Portugal becomes the main intermediary between the East and Europe in the trade of goods such as spices, precious stones, perfumes, silks, or porcelains. The Portuguese were also the first foreigners to be able to trade in Macau, also establishing trade links with China and Japan. In the process of maritime expansion, the Portuguese arrived also in Brazil. The Portuguese expansion allowed the development of sciences like astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and influenced the literature and the art of the 16th century. In the field of art, art manuelina, the Manueline style, emerges, which takes its name from the king of the time, the King Manuel I, which is characterized by the use of decorative elements inspired by the discoveries such as exotic plants, shells, ropes, or armillary spheres. The 16th century was also the stage for the genesis of a myth that still lingers in Portuguese culture today, the myth surrounding King Sebastian. King Sebastian became kind of a legend after his disappearance at the Battle of Alcácer Quibir in North Africa in 1578. Instead opened the door to a dynastic crisis, which meant the loss of national independence, which will only be restored in 1640 when King John IV ascends to the throne. Sebastian was the grandson of King John III, and his birth was much celebrated for fear of a succession problem in the Portuguese crown, because all the king's children had already died. King Sebastian endeavored to prepare an army to fight the Moors and to gain military prestige. He died, as I say, in North Africa in the Battle of Alcácer Quibir, leaving no descendants. Around him was born the legend of Sebastianismo, that is the hope that he would return one day on a foggy morning to save Portugal from all its problems. It is also essential if we talk about history of Portugal, to underline the importance of the Baroque as a cultural movement in Portugal. We know that in the 17th century, sensitivity and artistic expression evolved deeply. The calibration of classical and Renaissance forms was followed by a taste for movement and exuberance. So, a new style was born, the Baroque. The Baroque spread over almost all of Europe. It was a spectacularly magnificent art that touched sensitivity. The Baroque penetrated strongly in Portugal. The Baroque developed since the 17th century in literature, but also in arts, in the pomp of public ceremonies, reaching in the time of King John V, thanks to the influx of Brazilian gold, its full flowering. It was in the north of Portugal that the style reached the greatest decorative exuberance. In Oporto, Nicolau Nazoni built the Church of Clérigos, we can see here, which came to influence many churches and manor houses in the region, like Solar de Mateus in Vila Real. One of the most characteristic aspects of Portuguese Baroque resides in the richness and originality of the decorative arts. The most notable manifestation of decorative Baroque in Portugal is the splendid gilded carvings that cover the altarpieces and other altars of many churches across the country, like the Church of St. Francis in Oporto. On the other hand, due to King John V's taste for richness, other pieces such as carriages covered in gilded wood carving, furniture and jewelry reached great brightness. I will talk now a little bit about some of the greatest names of the Portuguese literature. I will start by Luís de Camões. Luís de Camões was the author of one of the masterpieces of Portuguese literature, Os Lusíadas, Lusíadas, an epic poem published in 1572. It is a poetic narrative that aims to exalt heroic and illustrious achievements of the Portuguese people. The epic poems of classical antiquity, Iliad and Odyssey by Homer, and Aeneid by Virgil, served as a model for Camões for the writing of Os Lusíadas. The epic underlines the providential mission of the Portuguese, namely with regard to the spread of the Christian faith and the humanist notion of homeland, associated with exaltation of Portuguese as a national language, which came from the times of the princes of Avis. The discoveries came to Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries as a renewed subject for travel literature. The revelation of new spaces, landscapes, flowers, customs, and religions, the adventures of fabulous trips inspired a vast descriptive literature which took various forms, from the great historical or geographical treatises to the cordial leaflets. Most of these texts are still interesting to read today due to the exoticism of the regions which were fueling the fascination of European readers. One of the works that is included in this type of literature is Peregrinação, Pilgrimage, by Fernão Mendes Pinto, first published in 1614. Taking the form of an autobiographical account, the Peregrinação, Pilgrimage, chronicles Fernão Mendes Pinto's travels and adventures in India, Ethiopia, China, Sumatra, and many other regions in Asia. The book, which greatly contributed to the construction of European knowledge about the East, and in particular about China, and it was a great success. The book was translated into other languages, such as the Spanish, with the title História Oriental de las Peregrinaciones de Fernão Mendes Pinto, by Francisco de Herrera Maldonado, or in French, with the title Les Voyages Aventureux de Fernão Mendes Pinto, by Bernard Figuier. Another important author in the Portuguese literature is Father António Vieira. Father António Vieira was a Jesuit priest, a Portuguese diplomat, preacher, philosopher, writer, and member of the Royal Council to the King of Portugal, John IV. Father Vieira left us a vast literary heritage. In addition to the nearly 200 sermons that make him the greatest Portuguese preacher, he wrote several letters, several prophetic treatises, and a series of texts of a political and social nature. He is one of the greatest names of Baroque prose in Portugal. In the 19th century, there was a change in tastes and literary trends. The literary realism movement, which in Portugal appeared around 1865, intends to present reality as it is, describing it in the most objective and detailed possible way. The authors who followed this movement in the middle of the 19th century intended to portray the vices of society through symbolic characters. Essa de Queiroz was one of these authors. Irony is the overarching unity of his multifaceted work. His novels are masterpieces of realism. Due to his mastery of his technique, his narrative art, his skillful character, Essa de Queiroz is still one of the most universally read Portuguese writers today, and his works, like these ones, are translated into several languages. By his side, Fernando Pessoa, he was born in Lisbon in 1888. Pessoa wrote poems in English since he was 13 years old, but it is like an essayist that he became famous in 1912 when he published a series of articles on new Portuguese poetry. He left a vast poetic production, which includes the work Mensagem, Message, a collection of poems that celebrates the heroes and prophesies the renewed greatness of the Portuguese homeland. The 44 poems of the Mensagem tell centuries of history of the glories that Portugal lived, and is a lot of heroes and legends like King Sebastian, Nuno Alves Pereira, Viriato, and so on. Here we see José Saramago, that was Nobel Prize in Literature. He was born in 1922. In 1998, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature in recognition of a literary work translated into more than 30 languages. In fact, he was the author of a vast work, mostly composed by novels, among which stands out the Memorial do Convento, first published in 1982. In this book, José Saramago crosses history, fiction, and the fantastic with invented characters and historical figures, such as King John V, his consort, Austrian Princess Dona Mariana Josefa, or Father Bartolomeu de Gusmão, to whom the invention of the passarola was attributed. Now we'll see some traditions and customs in Portugal. I will start with the caretos. The careto tradition is a prehistorical Celt religious ritual still practiced in some regions of Portugal, namely in the villages of Pudense and Varge in the north of Portugal. It currently takes place during winter and, in certain regions, carnival, and is one of the oldest traditions being practiced in Portugal still today. Caretos are masked young men dressed in suits made of colorful fringe wool kilts, wearing brass, leather, or wooden masks and rattles in their belts. Shrove Tuesday and the prior Sunday are the days when the caretos are most active. They appear in groups from every corner of the village, running and shouting, frightening the people and robbing all the wineries. The main target of these masquerade groups are single young girls who make them climb to the top of walls and verandas. Another tradition in Portugal is the folklore, the Portuguese traditional dances. The Portuguese dance is characterized by Portuguese folklore that takes different forms depending on the different regions of the country. These dances have a long tradition and we can find a lot of types like the fandango in Ribatejo or the corridinho em Algarve. About festive celebrations, I will start with the Festa dos Tabuleiros, the Festival of the Trays in Tomar. It's the most important celebration in the city of Tomar and one of the largest and oldest in the country, being a festival that attracts a lot of visitors in Portugal. It is also considered one of the biggest festivals in the world, having acquired international status and fame, being today one of the cultural icons of Portugal. Currently, there is an application for this celebration to be the first festivity in Portugal classified as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Also known as the Festa do Espírito Santo, it takes place every 4 years at the beginning of July. Another example of Portuguese festivities is the celebration around Lord Holy Christ of Miracles, o Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres, in Azores. This cult is based in a piece of Sacred Heart worshipped at the Nossa Senhora da Esperança convent in the city of Ponta Delgada on the island of São Miguel in Azores. It's an image carved in wood by an unknown author representing the Ecce Homo. This image that we see here represents the episode of Christ's life when he was presented to the crowd following his whipping, and includes a crown of thorns, uncovered torso, and a bruised body in the court of Pontius Pilate. The artist represented in a strong artistic style the contrast between violence on the body and the serenity of the expression, emphasized by the gaze from the image. Generally, this statue and piece of art is on display in the sanctuary of Lord Holy Christ in the convent of Nossa Senhora da Esperança in Ponta Delgada, but annually leads a procession to the streets of the city. The festivals in honor of the Lord Holy Christ of the Miracles occur on the fifth Sunday after Easter, the day on which a great procession winds the streets of the capital and terminating on the Thursday of Ascension. Another example are the festivities of Our Lady of Agonia, Nossa Senhora da Agonia, in Viana do Castelo, in the north of Portugal. Since 1783, this festivity has been held in the month of August. This festivity of the Senhora da Agonia, she is the patroness of local fishermen, dates back to ancient times and is already one of the largest Portuguese religious festivals. Another image. June is, in Portugal, the month of the popular saints, with festivals and entertainment all over the country on the nights of St. Anthony, St. John, and St. Peter. There are festivities of great animation in which the people go out street to eat, drink, and dance with the smell of basil, beautiful colored balloons, and cheerful popular marches. In Lisbon, from 12 to 13 June, St. Anthony is celebrated with marches organized by residents of each neighborhood to the sound of happy music, colorful costumes, and well-decorated arches. This tradition has come a long way. In 1932, a prize for the best march of the year was instituted. In that year, 6 neighborhoods participated, but in the following year, 12 neighborhoods participated, making the march the biggest ethnographic manifestation of the St. Anthony festivities, with parades and exhibitions on Avenida da Liberdade. We see here a popular ball in St. Antonio festivities, the sardines that everybody eat in these festivities, to show now an image about the festivities of St. John in Oporto. In Oporto, from the 23rd to the 24th of June, St. John is celebrated. St. John's waterfalls, as Cascatas São João, which populate the city, are built on public sidewalks or door sills, usually by children who usually raise donations for ornaments and clay figurines. The best known and traditional waterfall is that of Fontainhas. On June 29, St. Peter is celebrated, mainly in fishing regions. In all these popular festivities, as tradition dictates, people eat sardines and roasted peppers and dance through the night, hitting anyone on the head with plastic mallets or leek. It's also important to talk a little bit about fado. Fado is a Portuguese musical style. It is usually sung by a single person, the fadista, accompanied by a classical guitar called viola, and the Portuguese guitar. Fado was elevated to the category of cultural and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO in a declaration approved by the committee of this international organization held in Bali, Indonesia, in 2011. The word fado comes from the Latin fatum, that is destiny. However, fado only became known after 1940 in the streets of Lisbon. The oldest type of fado is the sailor fado, fado marinheiro, and it is this fado that will become the model for other types of fado. During the in the 30s and 40s, the last century, cinema, theater, and radio will project this musical genre to the general public, making it somehow more commercial. One of the greatest names is, of course, the name of Amália Rodrigues. If we talk about Portuguese traditions, we need to refer the rooster of Barcelos, o galo de Barcelos. In fact, when we talk about crafts, a symbol appears immediately, the rooster of Barcelos. This icon of Portuguese identity from the city of Barcelos in the north of Portugal is known for its bold colors and red hearts on a black background. What you may note is that this figure was born from a legend that takes back to medieval times when a pilgrim from Santiago de Compostela in the north of Spain was saved from death by a dead rooster that sang at the same time that the man was being hanged. And therefore it is said that having a rooster of Barcelos at home brings luck. The popular image has become a recurrent feature of promotional activities in the country and is undoubtedly one of the greatest Portuguese tourist symbols. Another example are the renda de bilros or bobbin lace. The bobbin lace is a kind of lace more common in fishing areas on the coast, such as Peniche and Vila de Conde. This art goes back to the end of the 16th century, with fishermen's women using their free time to produce these pieces of enormous delicacy. Another example, tapetes de Raiolos tapestry, and it was in Alentejo, in the village of Raiolos, that one of the best known tapestries in the country was born. The Raiolos rugs are embroidered in wool with the sewing stitch that gives them their name on a canvas, cotton, or linen, with the first records on these handicrafts dating from the 16th centuries. These rugs are evidenced by their robustness and geometric shapes produced by generations of Portuguese embroiderers. Another example, the ceramics from Caldas da Rainha. These are decorative ceramics inspired by naturalistic motifs and become a kind of a national ex libris, mainly from the 19th century, when the entry of Rafael Bordal Pinheiro in the local industry of Caldas da Rainha. Another example, the Valentine scarves, os lenços dos namorados. These scarves are also embroidered by human of marriageable age, and they handed them over to their loved ones who, if they used them in public, demonstrated that they had started the relationship. Another symbol on Portuguese culture is the tile, o azulejo. The word azulejo, tile, designates a piece of thin ceramic, generally square, in which one side is glazed, resulting from the firing of a coating, generally called enamel, which becomes impermeable and shiny. This face can be monochromatic or polychromatic, like this one, smooth or embossed. The tile is generally used in large numbers as an element associated with architecture in covering interior or exterior surfaces or as an isolated decorative element. The subjects oscillate between the reports of historical episodes, mythological scenes, religions, iconography, and a wide range of decorative elements, geometric, vegetal, and so on, applied to walls, floors, and ceiling of palaces, gardens, religious buildings such as churches, convents, housing, and public. With different characteristics, this material has become an element of construction disseminated in different countries, assuming itself in Portugal as an important support for national artistic expression over more than 5 centuries. Among Portuguese Christmas traditions, we can find the nativity scenes, such as the Christmas crib. We see here a Christmas crib made in Estremoz. And now I will finish the presentation talking a little bit about the main monuments in Portugal that are well worth a visit. I will start with Castelo de Almorol, Castle of Almorol. It's a medieval castle atop in the highland of Almorol, in the middle of the Tagus River, in Portugal center region, and the castle was part of the defensive line controlled by the Knights Templar and a stronghold used during the Portuguese reconquest. Another example to be visited, the Mosteiro da Batalha, Monastery of Batalha. This monastery was a Dominican religious house in Batalha, also in central region of Portugal, and it was built in commemoration of the victory of the Portuguese in the Battle of Aljubarrota. It's one of the best Portuguese examples of the late Gothic architecture in Portugal. Another example, a Torre de Belém, the Belém Tower in Lisbon, is a 16th century fortification located in Lisbon that served as a point of embarkation for Portuguese explorers and sailors, and as a ceremonial gateway to Lisbon too. It was built during the Portuguese Renaissance and is a prominent example of the Portuguese Manueline style, still Manuelino, but it also incorporates hints of other architectural styles. Since 1983, the tower has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site, along with the Jerónimos Monastery, Mosteiro dos Jerónimos. Another place to be visited is the Palácio da Pena, Pena Palace in Sintra. This is a Romanticist palace in Sintra, near Lisbon, and the castle stands on the top of a hill in Sintra Mountains, above the town of Sintra, and on a clear day, it can be easily seen from Lisbon and much of its metropolitan area. It is a national monument and constitutes one of the major expressions of the 19th century Romanticism in the world. This palace is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the 7 wonders of Portugal. In Oporto, we can visit the Cathedral of Oporto. It's a Roman Catholic church located in the historical center of the city. It is one of the city's oldest monuments and one of the most important local Romanesque monuments. And the Museu de Arte Contemporânea de Serralves, Contemporary Art Museum of Serralves, that is a cultural institution located also in Oporto and one of the most important institutions worldwide. The museum, designed by Cisa Vieira, is now one of the most visited museums in Portugal and one of the most relevant in the contemporary art circuit in Europe. I will finish my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you both for being with us. I hope all people who assisted have enjoyed this session. And I would like you to join us next this Friday on the 26th for the second session of this seminar. We will speak about gastronomy and about tourism. So thank you very much for your time.